千里之行，始于足下。A journey of 1,000 miles begins beneath the feet. We now gather in the Tao to travel the journey together. Welcome to Tao Talks with Eric Lin, where we take a deep dive into the Tao Te Ching by Lao Tzu. I would like to extend a warm welcome to you. Thank you for joining us. I would like to invite you to center your thoughts and direct your attention to this moment in time, to the here and now, to be fully present and mindfully aware as we all ready ourselves for the sacred process in the Tao with one another. As I mentioned last time, this chapter title, For the Stomach, may sound a bit odd. Why would there be a chapter about the stomach in the Tao? Yes, we know the Tao includes everything, but shouldn't the chapters in the Tao Te Ching be more about spiritual matters? Well, the more we looked into it last time, the more sense it made. We found that stomach was simply a metaphoric reference from Lao Tzu about the practical side of life. From the perspective of ancient kings, they definitely wanted the population to be well fed and therefore peaceful. From the perspective of you and me, you and I want to take care of the necessities of life so we can pay attention to higher level concerns such as spirituality and cultivation. Overall, the ancient sages were quite the pragmatic bunch. They never engaged in pure philosophy with head in the clouds. So let's take a quick look at the chapter itself. It is a relatively short chapter, only 7 lines, and there are obvious sectional divisions. So we did the work to divide it up into 3 sections. And the 3 sections start out with section 1 containing 3 lines about the 5 colors, sounds, and flavors. Section 2 contains 2 lines about thrilling activities and desirable objects. And the end of section 2 is what we got to last time. Note that the first 2 sections, 1 and 2, are different in terms of line length. In the first 3 lines, they all have 6 characters each. It's the same structure as we can see in the highlighting, so they're easily identified as a section. Section 2, we've got 2 lines with 9 and 8 characters respectively. But note the consistent use of the same 2 characters in the middle. You can see that it's translated the same way as make one in English. And you can reference back and forth to see the similarity. Now, the first 3 sections talk about the 5s. That is, 5 colors, 5 sounds, 5 flavors. But overall, we have 5 lines from line 1 to line 5 talking about the material plane in which we live and the forces, the manifestations in the material plane that have an effect on us. So the fives are reflections of this numerical quantity at two levels. 5 sounds, 5 colors, 5 flavors in the first 3 lines, and overall 5 categories. Section 3 is the conclusion, and we will be getting to them today. So the first thing that we should do is to quickly summarize the 5 categories. So recap 1 is about the manifestations of the material world involving sensory input that affect all of us. So they are 5 colors, 5 sounds, 5 flavors. Of course, we do not restrict ourselves to just the senses of sight, sound, and taste. In the Tao, all of the other senses are accounted for as well. And we will get to that. So the other 2 categories, as I talked about, include, first of all, activities, represented here as raising and hunting. So it's not just the sights and sounds and flavors, which, as I said, are all sensory inputs. It is also activities and, the next line, goods that are difficult to acquire. That points to material things. Activities and things also have a huge effect on us. So these 5 categories are very important because it's talking about your life and mine. It's all about the way we live in the material world. So for that reason, let me quickly summarize all 5 categories that Lao Tzu touched on, and that'll set us up to go over the last 2 lines in the conclusion. First, we have the 5 colors. As you can see here in the slide, in our world, we do have many distracting and tempting sights, things that we can see. Too many of them, and you and I become spiritually blinded and lost. Now, that blinding effect and being lost without a sense of direction, without knowing which way to go, this may be due to the forgetting of the essence of the Tao. We may forget that it cannot be seen. You and I cannot see the Tao any more than we can see gravity. We know gravity exists because we can observe its effects. But we can never see gravity itself. It's the same with the Tao. Now, the original nature that is within us, our connection to the Tao, is the Tao itself. We and the Tao are one. Our original nature, like the Tao, because it is one with the Tao, it is also without form, without shape, without color. For that reason, we can be quite certain that the 5 colors are not aligned with the Tao. The visible and the unseen are diametrically opposite to each other. And this is part of the reasons why When we pay too much attention to the 5 colors, we are distracted, we are tempted, and we lose sight of our own original nature. So that's the 5 colors. What about the 5 sounds? Well, in the same way, the sounds distract us just like the colors do. It's just that they distract us through a different sensory channel, hearing instead of vision. Nevertheless, their ability to distract us is no less powerful than sights. One can easily be pulled off the path of humility with flattering words. Probably you and I have experience of that in the past. Someone says something nice, and before you know it, it's gotten to your head. Another example is that we can be easily pulled off the path of tranquility when other people say a few incendiary, triggering remarks that really push your button, that really get to you, get under your skin. Then tranquility is forgotten. So distracting sound plus noise pollution is all about the 5 sounds. It's the things that people say, plus it's the noise of the collective. Too much of either one or both, and you and I become spiritually deaf. We're not in tune with the Tao anymore. We become mentally overwhelmed, which has a big effect on the spiritual side. So we may forget that the essence of our original nature is silence. The essence of the Tao is silence. And our original nature aligns with the Tao. And when we're distracted and overwhelmed by the sounds and the noise, we lose that connection, the connection to the quietness where we can connect with the Tao. And then the last of the 5s will be the 5 flavors. So in the world, we know there are many tempting flavors to taste, to sample, to consume. Too much of it, and what is the effect on us? We become spiritually numb. We lose our zest for life. So this is the 3rd major sensory input channel, the sense of taste. It is also the catch-all category for the other physical sensations, like touch. So with the 3 categories, you can see the overall point Lao Tzu is making for us. We need our senses to survive and operate in the material world. We need them to live our lives. At the same time, if we leave the senses unmanaged, they can easily cause an overload, making life as much more complicated than it has to be. So we may forget the nature of the Tao is simplicity and plainness. We may forget our own roots in that plainness and simplicity. We know strong flavors can lead us to overconsumption, overindulgence. Novel tastes can become addicting. Overstimulation of physical senses make us jaded. And this is actually connected. The physical sensation part of it is connected to the next category. So for category number 4, we have hunting, racing. And in the order that Lao Tzu talked about, it's racing and then hunting. But he means the same thing, the activities that are thrilling and entertaining. So this is definitely different from sights, sounds, or taste. It's a meta category in the sense that it can be a combination of 2 or 3 of the sensory categories above. So for instance, when you and I watch a movie or maybe catch a television show, you've got the 5 colors and the 5 sounds blasting at you. Watching the visuals, hearing the music, the dialogue, etc. And if at the same time you're also having popcorn or ice cream or chips or other snacks as you watch, you've got the 5 flavors in there too. So activities can be a combination of all sensory inputs. Now, from experience, I think we all know we can go totally overboard with activities. We know that a moderate amount of entertainment can be a good thing. Too much of it can turn us into overstimulated, a little bit like a zombie, walking around in a daze. So for this category, the danger for the many activities to thrill and entertain us is the detrimental negative effects. We may become overexcited and spiritually unsettled, which makes it hard to regain tranquility and composure. We may forget physical thrills are just in the moment. They cannot last. They're also not the main goal. What I mean is, in terms of the meaning of life, we're not here primarily to consume entertainment or to experience thrills. We may forget the meaning, the deeper meaning of life in the cherished moments of peace, the special delights we experience from simple things. Not to mention the connection with people that can only be built through companionship over time, rather than the chaos of momentary thrills. So remember that this is the catch-all categories that incorporates, these are activities that incorporates all the different sensory inputs, and the third channel, taste, can also get us to the sensory inputs in terms of bodily sensations like touch. This is applicable to all activities that get people worked up. It doesn't have to be just physical pursuits like racing and hunting. For example, gatherings where attendees are whipped into a frenzy, whether for the purpose of selling products, some sort of rally, some kind of rally to subscribe to extreme beliefs. All of these are possible paths to overexcitement, overstimulation, in turn leading to stress within one's mind, strife with one's family, possibly even financial ruin. So the detrimental effects is what Lao Tzu is trying to convey to us. So what about the 5th category? The last category, material things. This is the big one because it affects most of us. Indeed, the vast majority of humanity. As you can see in the slide, what Lao Tzu says is that the hard to acquire goods that are difficult to acquire, there are many desirable objects to inspire envy and lust, so people go after them. As they go after these things, we become trapped in material acquisitions. And we may forget that all of us, no exception, we came into this world with nothing. One day, we're going to leave with nothing. We forget that because when we're under the powerful influence of material things, we no longer keep in mind their transient nature and the reason we need them in the first place. We may forget everything comes and goes. Nothing really lasts. And after all, we acquire things to use them for a particular purpose. Why do I say we forget that? Because for many, somewhere along the way of acquiring things, the original purpose is cast aside, or it turns into acquisition for the sake of acquisition or possession, like buying things just to own them rather than to use them. And if they're never actually used, then the scenario is no different from never having them in the first place. So with these 5 categories listed out like this, I think we have the clarity that we need. We're now ready to delve into the last section of this chapter. Let's step beyond the first 5 lines and go to line 6. Line 6 says, therefore, the sages care for the stomach and not the eyes. And we begin to see why this chapter is using stomach, care for the stomach, as its title. And because of that, the character for stomach has a special place of prominence. It is the first significant character out of this entire line, so I'm highlighting it, and I want to share the pronunciation with everyone. Fu, meaning stomach. Now, literally it means stomach, but here it is not literally stomach. The meaning is sustenance, the basics of life, the bare necessities. Now, I want to be very careful in noting here, in the West, sometimes when we speak of the stomach, we're making a connection between the act of consumption to gluttony or overindulgence. Here, it's about eating to survive, eating to maintain the physical body. So this context has nothing to do with being gluttonous or overindulging, eating too much. It's just about what you need to maintain your physical existence. And as I mentioned, Lao Tzu, like the other Tao sages, focus on practical, everyday considerations. The ancient sages are pragmatic, always keeping an eye on what's happening around them, everyday considerations. Indeed, the ancient culture in ancient China was all about pragmatic concerns as well. It was all about taking care of the basics first, and once you have that, once you have a solid foundation, then you can contemplate on building from there to whatever else may be coming up in life. But first, the basics must be taken care of. So to this day, oftentimes, people in Asian cultures will greet one another asking about whether or not they've eaten, because it is that basic consideration. But let me give you the other context that is also more important. In addition to the practical aspects of life, when we talk about stomach, especially in the Tao context, it also represents the internal instead of the external. Like when we say the gut or gut feeling, this is the inner self. This is about the internal virtues that are not readily visible to other people in the external world. So keep this in mind. Stomach is about what is within. And this could be the character traits that are not necessarily advertised for the world to see. Now, let's cover the other significant character, mu. This means I, singular, or eyes, plural, depending on the context, depending on usage. Here, just like stomach, it's not literally eye or eyes. There's actually two layers of meaning associated with it that are connected to seeing, to vision, to the visible. First, mu is about the cause of temptation. That is, what the eyes can see, the heart will desire. So the cause of temptation associated with the eyes. Then, the cause of chaos or confusion. That is, the mind becomes confused and anxious by the overwhelming desires that it is experiencing. So because of that, the sages actively manage perception. They understand that this sensory input can easily be confused, be overwhelmed. And when the eyes see all the colorful acquisitions in the world that one can pursue, it is likely that there's going to be some confusion in the mind, causing the spirit to lose its way. So this is referencing back to the five colors. The eyes are connected to the five colors in that way. And when I say the sages manage perception, they manage the eyes because it's a gateway to desires. So to master the desiring state, they have to start out by mastering perception. And just like we talk about the stomach representing the internal, we can also look at the eyes as representing all the elements of the external world that are visible, the manifestations of the material world. This could be things that exist, or it can also be the visible signs of what people do. Let me give you a couple of examples to explain what I mean. Think about the dichotomy of stomach and the eyes, the two things. If you emphasize the stomach over the eyes, what that means is that your focus is on the virtues that you cultivate internally. Your focus is not making noise to draw attention. Therefore, you are the quiet builder. That is, you are content to work behind the scenes. And it doesn't matter to you if what you do is unnoticed by other people. What matters is the work itself. What matters is your internal states, not external manifestations. So let's talk about the flip side of the coin. If someone emphasizes the eyes over the stomach, what that means is that he or she is much more interested in appearance than underlying reality. This is the person who likes to show off. This is the person who's interested in making sure everybody knows about the good things they have done. If no one pays attention to a particular thing, this person would not be interested in doing it, no matter how worthwhile it may be. So that's the difference. That's the significance of stomach versus the eyes. Let's continue. Now we look at this entire line. Line 6, therefore the sages care for the stomach and not the eyes. Now we know this doesn't mean that they enjoy eating but not seeing. It goes a lot deeper than that. One key difference that the sages realize is that there's the stomach itself as part of your body. It has a finite capacity. But the same cannot be said for your eyes seeing things, causing the heart to desire things. Unlike the finite capacity of the stomach, there is no limit to human desires, greed, avarice. These are bottomless pits. So when I say it like that, I think it makes perfect sense that you and I can agree that we can manage the finite capacity of the stomach. Never eat to excess. But how do you manage the infinite desires that's possible from seeing endless variety of the 5 colors? One would not even be able to make an attempt to manage that infinite quantity. And another way to say the same thing is that it makes sense for the sages to take care of the practical necessities of the stomach and not try to cater to the endless, impractical needs of the eyes. So saying the same things. And the first bullet that I have here says, the sages mind the basics of life and never get carried away. So now you can see there are different expressions, all expressing the same idea from Lao Tzu. Now, I want to make a note here that the sages absolutely still enjoy all the goodness life has to offer, but they do so in moderation. That's what I mean by not getting carried away. Now, moderation is such an important concept that they practice moderation in moderation as well. So the sages enjoy celebration, experiencing thrills. They can do that once in a while, never to excess. This is because they wish to preserve their ability to enjoy. They watch for the possibility of becoming overstimulated, which will only rob you of the ability to continue your enjoyment. So the sages are wise in maximizing enjoyment in life over an entire lifespan. So they prefer, if you think about the example of light, they want the light of life enjoyment to continue glowing from beginning to end and not to burn out brightly, like a momentary flash, burning out, fading away, and then because of overstimulation, unable to enjoy as much ever again. Life is transient enough as it is. There is no need to add even more transience. And this is the reason why the sages can continue to delight in life itself, never becoming jaded, tired, or bored. The sages uphold the mind and their original nature. By not pursuing external sensory pleasures excessively, they can de-emphasize the outside world, turn their attention to the internal mental and spiritual landscape. So if ever you wonder, how can the sages be as they are? This is how they cultivate their internal virtues. They do that for tranquility, composure, and peace of mind. Line 7. Line 7 says, that is why they discard the other and take this. They do without that and they accept this. So now it is important for us to talk about exactly what it is that the sages discard. Lao Tzu probably feels that it is very clear just by reading the previous, lines 1 to 5, it's clear what he wanted for people to discard. But let's go ahead and name them. The sages discard. First, temptations and distractions. And we describe that as the 5 colors. The sages also discard words that are untrue or misleading. This is part of the 5 sounds. And remember, when we talk about these untrue words, we're taking this from another part of the Tao Te Ching that talks about how beautiful words are not true. Words that are pleasing to hear, words that gratify the ego, not necessarily what you need to hear, not necessarily the home truth that you actually need. And the 5 sounds also include, as I mentioned, the chaotic cacophony, the noise. Then, the sages also discard physical pleasures that numb the senses, the 5 flavors. And now that you've heard the explanation, you know that this is the excessive part that is too much, that overwhelm your senses and therefore make you jaded, overstimulated, and then numb. Now, these are the three 5s. Remember, we also have activities, and that would be the sages discarding excessive pursuit of thrills, represented by Lao Tzu as racing and hunting. And lastly, the one that I called the big one, objects that contribute little to life, the hard to acquire goods. So all of these we can see are applicable to our lives. So as an example, why do we engage in a mad dash to get from one place to another? That would definitely be part of the frantic activities represented by racing and hunting. Why do we step on other people to get what we want? Well, it's because it may be hard to acquire goods and we have succumbed to temptation. Now, there are many things in life that may be desirable by many, but actually contribute little to no value to one's own life. And it is up to each one of us to make that determination. Do I actually need this? Is it actually adding that much to my life? So These are all the elements that have tainted or obscured our original nature. In the Tao, oftentimes we use a metaphor to talk about this idea of discarding. What should we discard in life? We can use the proper care for a tree as the metaphor for the proper care of one's life. So wise gardeners know that in order for a tree to grow tall and strong, they must pay attention to its needs. They must tend to it. One of the first things that they must do is to remove weeds around it to avoid root competition. And root competition just means that the plants that you want, the tree, is forced to share the water and nutrients in the soil with the plants that you do not want, the weeds surrounding it. Root competition. This is a good match for us to talk about the distractions in life. So the wise Tao cultivator would discard the distractions of the external world. And the reason why this is a good fit in the metaphor is that the distractions we come across in the material world, they too compete for our attention, just like the roots of the weeds compete with the roots for the tree for water and nutrients. Our time and energy in this lifetime are finite quantities. Therefore, it would be to our best interest to not waste them. Then, another thing that the wise gardener must do is to remove any blockage of proper irrigation. This is the corresponding to the removal or discarding of physical and mental clutter that are also blocking. So the reason why this metaphor works is that on the gardening side, you want just the right amount of water to feed the tree, neither too much nor too little. And the Tao for us, spiritual learning, is like water to the tree. Clutter of any sort can serve as blockage. And if we end up with too much clutter in life, whether physical or mental, emotional, spiritual, we cannot flow with the Tao so easily. So letting go of clutter in general has the effect of allowing us to absorb the Tao better. The third thing that the wise gardener must do is to remove withering or broken branches. This will improve the overall health of the tree. So in a very similar way, Tao cultivators discard habits that we know to be detrimental. To carry bad habits into the future, into life, is like a tree growing with withering or broken branches. When you and I can change negative habits or replace them with positive habits that promote well-being, we improve ourselves overall, just like the tree's overall health has been improved. Good habits will serve us indefinitely into the future. We do them without thinking, and that's the benefit. So the fourth thing has to do with removing crossing branches to improve the tree structure. So it can happen that in the growth of a tree that the branches are growing too close together. so they cross or they rub right against each other. This corresponds to the wise Tao cultivator discarding excess that can lead to negative outcomes. In this entire chapter, we have talked about how the sights, the sounds, the flavors, activities, material things can all be pursued to excess. So that is what this is all about. For the tree, too much growth can be a bad thing. The crossing branches are not good for the overall tree structure. So anything that we do in life that is consistently excessive, sooner or later, they're going to show up as negative outcomes. And this is why the sages will remind us of moderation. We should pull back from the edge of excess to seek the point of equilibrium or balance. So the last thing that the wise gardener would do is seasonal. That is, winter pruning is something that is beneficial for the tree because it promotes vigorous new growth when spring comes around. For the Tao cultivator, this corresponds to letting go of attachments to promote spiritual growth. In the Tao, less can often be more. And the sages find this to be the case in so many different aspects of life. The proper pruning in wintertime leads to abundant new growth in springtime. It is a fitting metaphor to represent relinquishing, letting go of the various attachments that we have. Generally speaking, any kind of attachment will end up being a dead weight in your life. Attachments hold us down. They become a spiritual burden. And when you cut the string holding them to you, you do feel spiritually lighter. Just like the tree, when the right time comes, the springtime for spirituality, you will experience a burst of spiritual growth. That is, insights, perspectives, clarity, and harmony. So for all of those reasons, this is not really just the Tao of gardening, but also the Tao of discarding that, according to this particular chapter, to know what to do without in life for your own overall benefit. We have the last line that we need to go through. Last line, line 7, says, that is why they discard the other and take this. With the tree carrying metaphor, we can see what is meant by discarding the other. There is a whole bunch of things that the Tao sages would discard from their own lives. Now, we should also talk about what they take, what they accept. Now, even from just the tree carrying metaphor, we can guess at what some of those things might be. In the proper carrying of a tree, we already know that the tree would need water, would need sunlight, would need soil, etc. But let's talk about the things that Lao Tzu has in mind to convey. The sages take a focus on the spiritual rather than the material. As I mentioned, when we talk about the stomach, we're talking about the internal. When we talk about the eyes, we're talking about the external. These correspond to the spiritual and the material, respectively. And what about countering the 5 sounds? The sages would take silence, quietness, fewer words. And this is because they know just by saying nothing or uttering a few choice words, they can actually speak volumes. They can provide this few words or silence that can convey everything. And then the sages take authentic simplicity. Simplicity in life. There are so many things that we overcomplicate for ourselves. And by being authentic, the sages can strengthen their connection with other people. I previously talked about how the authentic sages were always of the people and for the people. It was extremely important for them to have that strong connection with the community. And then sustained joy in peace and tranquility. So what I mean by that is rather than to be frantic, rather than to be hectic, what the sages want, they want to be able to enjoy life in a sustainable way, to continuously be able to do that, not burn out. And this lets them enjoy peace and tranquility and harmonious balance. And lastly, the sages take the Tao itself. The Tao itself is also connected to the purity and power of our original, truest selves. And let me share with you what this tells me about myself. We've been talking about purpose in life and sometimes forgetting the purpose. I know that we all come here with different tasks, sacred journeys, different missions, different meaning and purpose that we want to manifest in life. So my role in all of this is to be someone who provides reminders for everybody. These are things that I study myself. These are things that resonate with me. When they do, I realize that the reason for the resonation is that I knew about these. I had them originally as part of my original nature. If that is true for me, it is also true for you. So what I'm doing is only to bring up these great truths in the hopes that they resonate with you as well, because they too are a part of you. If you feel the resonance, it only means that you've known it all along, and now you've just been reminded of it. So, to talk about everything together in this chapter as a whole, I want to present one last slide to show everything together. When I say everything, it all starts with the problems we see in the material world. As we have talked about before, originally in ancient times, the sages observed the world. They noted the many issues that people had with materialistic desires. Their observations were timeless, so that today we look at the world ourselves and we see the same thing. We see the same issues that people have with materialistic desires. So listing out here, we've got the colorful distractions and temptations of the material world. That's the first one up. We have the cacophony, all the noise and lies of the material world. We encounter these every day. We have the third one, the 5 flavors, that is the excessive overindulgence, too much food and drinks. And we see this manifesting in our world as health issues, health problems, weight problems. That's very common. And then next one down, the excessive pursuit of extreme thrills. As I noted previously, today we have so many more options than we had before. When it comes to entertainment and thrills, there are so many different ways for us to pursue that. And it's not necessarily to our benefit, as Lao Tzu has pointed out. And then lastly, at the bottom, the excessive pursuit of desirable goods, or goods that are difficult to acquire and therefore people find them to be irresistibly desirable. So the sage is in a position to watch all these. But the sage, unlike most people, can rely on the Tao. The sages have guidance from the Tao on how to handle all 5 of these categories that we have talked about. So for the 5 colors, the distractions and temptations of the material world, the sages can draw from Dao De Jing that in chapter 33, it talks about contentment. The line from 33, highlighted here in blue, says, those who know contentment are wealthy. So that right there is a penetrating remark to let us know that those who do not know contentment are going to be forever mired in poverty. They see the 5 colors and they just want more. There is no end to the distractions and temptations that one can see. Just when you think you've got the latest and greatest, a new generation of better and sleeker comes along, which only causes more envy and lust. So contentment is the key. The best way and the only way to handle the 5 colors is the mastery of contentment. Without it, well, the 5 colors are out there, it's never enough. You always want more. When you master contentment, one can truly be happy and truly be wealthy at any level. So what about the 5 sounds? The pleasing words, the cacophony. The sages can draw from Dao De Jing chapter 26, which addresses quietness. In the highlighted line, it'll say, quietness is the master of restlessness. We have talked about how the overstimulation in the material world causing people to be restless physically, mentally, and spiritually. And all the sights and sounds, especially the sounds. In addition to the 5 colors, we have to deal with the 5 sounds. Just like the sights, the sounds can be attractive to many people. For instance, when people travel, many flock to crowded tourist destinations. Why? Because these destinations seem to be so dynamic and active. So people want to experience that. And when people communicate, many like to spread rumors and gossip. Why? They want to add even more noise to life. Tao cultivators would be the very opposite. They recognize the noisiness is not our original state. Therefore, Tao cultivators cultivate quietness internally and externally. Cultivating quietness internally has to do with the internal work, like contemplation and meditation practices that give one the tools necessary to shut off the internal noise. Now let's move on to the 5 flavors. Here, Tao sages can draw upon Tao Te Ching chapter 80, which talks about savor their food. This is a shorthand way to talk about how one can live the simple life and actually enjoy every moment. So I want to be clear. It isn't that enjoyment of food is forbidden in the Tao. Quite the opposite. When one practices the Tao, one realizes the better way is to enjoy in moderation so you don't end up bloated, numb, and jaded. In other words, you're preserving your ability to enjoy for as long as possible. So the overall effect in life is that you actually end up maximizing enjoyment over your entire lifetime. So far from forbidding enjoyment, this is the way to maximize enjoyment. That's a crucial distinction. So what about the 4th category? All about racing, hunting, thrilling activities. Tao sages would draw upon Tao Te Ching chapter 32 that talks about knowing when to stop. And it says, knowing when to stop, thus avoiding danger. This makes a lot of sense when you continue with the same mode of thinking from the first 3. It's not that enjoyment of activities is forbidden, it's quite the opposite. The better way is to have fun, but not get carried away, so you don't risk injury. And you know that if you were to injure yourself or others, it will definitely get in the way of you continuing your enjoyment. So this too is all about maximizing your enjoyment over your entire lifetime, to be smart about it, to be wise. And then last but not the least, for material things, Tao sages can rely on chapter 3 that says, do not treasure goods that are hard to obtain. It's the same expression as found in this chapter. The goods that are difficult to acquire, the goods that are hard to obtain, there are synonyms saying the same thing. And as I noted, this is connected to the first remedy about the eyes, because goods are one category of things that one can see leading to desires. The sages recognize the subjective nature of value in material objects. That is to say, one person may, as an example, have an extensive collection of certain things. And this person, this collector, is constantly looking to complete the collection. And this could be anything. Someone may collect statuettes of frogs. Another person may collect dolls, toys, action figures. The list goes on and on. The bottom line is that before too long, after some decades, the collector passes away. What happens to the collection? It is sold sometimes for pennies on the dollar, or it is donated, or it is trashed. When you see this from the perspective of the Tao, transcending a lifetime, the perspective tells us one thing. There is no need to treasure such goods in the first place. Exactly as Tao Te Ching chapter 3 says. So for all of these on the right-hand side, these are what Lao Tzu meant by caring for the stomach. while everything on the left-hand side is what he meant by the eyes. So the eyes is just an overall representation of the manifestations in the material world, and we're recognizing the different sensory channels. Basically, these are the challenges that most people have in life. The solutions, the antidotes, the countermeasures, the protection offered by the Tao, all on the right-hand side. And we're using stomach to represent them because it's all about going back to the basics, to be in touch with what truly matters. And they all originate from within oneself. They all come out of the internal virtues that we cultivate. So by the same logic, the eyes, as I mentioned, represent the external world, materialistic desires, the root cause for so many problems that we have. What the eyes see, the mind latches onto, the mind will form desires, experience anxiety, confusion, and this will only make it more difficult for the spirit. And discard takes should be obvious now. The sage discards everything to the left-hand side, takes everything to the right-hand side. At the end of the day, this is why Lao Tzu ends this chapter with, therefore, the sages care for the stomach and not the eyes. That is why they discard the other and take this. So I cannot think of a easier, simpler way to represent that dichotomy, what you want and what you do not want in your own life. And this wraps up our discussion of all the lines in this particular chapter. I think we are now ready to go through the paraphrase. As always, our purpose is to demonstrate our complete understanding by expressing the original meaning using modern language, modern terms, modern verbiage. And here's the chapter. By now, we should know very well that the first section is about the senses, the 5 sounds, the 5 colors, the 5 flavors. So how can we paraphrase that? Let me offer the following. The material world offers many temptations and distractions. They are colorful and they can confuse us and blind us. There are also many sounds, flatteries, arguments, lies, and so on. They are loud and they can quickly overwhelm us. Last but not the least, there are sensory stimulations for every taste. They excite us initially, but leave us numb eventually. So that is the first section covering the 3 primary channels of sensory input. We now go to the next section, which is all about thrilling activities and material things. So to paraphrase this, I would like to offer the following. In this world, many rush around as if they are in a race. They pursue fame and fortune as if they are in a hunt. They become crazed, failing to realize their lust for material things will only result in negative consequences. So there's the paraphrase for the second section. I'm combining multiple ideas into the same paragraph, but I think having gone through everything in detail, you know that there are subtleties and nuance in these lines. Now, finally, the conclusion, lines 6 and 7. This is all about the stomach versus the eyes, discarding the other and taking this. So how can we convey that using modern language? Something that is easily understood by anyone coming across it. I would like to offer the following. Observing all this, the sages conclude that one should focus on the simple basics of life rather than the many desires of the material world. They discard all the noise, all the words, all the rush, so they can embrace the Tao. So that is a paraphrase. I want to encourage everyone that when you have followed all the discussions and you understand the meaning exactly, please take some time and paraphrase these lines for yourself. I think you will find the practice rather beneficial and revealing. Finally, we have the final segment to go through, and that is the full circle to really wrap up our discussion. So for this particular chapter, we start out, as you can see, with the fives. 5 colors, 5 sounds, 5 flavors, and then we end on that section about the stomach versus the eyes, discarding, taking. So let's talk about the full circle. Lao Tzu says, sages discard the other, eyes or desires, and take this, stomach or simplicity. Now, I think in our discussion, you have seen all the implications of that. It's not just, simply talking about the eyes or the stomach. They imply many other things. Now, let's go ahead and link it back to the beginning to form that full circle. We see the reference to colors, sounds, and flavors. So what can we take away from this? The message from Lao Tzu is clear. At the bottom, we're talking about living the simple life, the practical life. How can we do that? Well, Lao Tzu says we must start out by managing sensory input. That is, our perception, what we see, what we hear, what we accept, what we experience as far as sensory stimulus. These have to be managed and experienced in moderation, and we have to manage them from the perspective of the long-term benefits to our lives. And that puts us in a good position. It makes us understand that real joy, true joy, is nowhere to be found in overindulgence or any excessive pursuit of anything, any sensations. But it is always there. It can always be found in the Tao. So that leaves the last lines of the Tao Te Ching chapter 12 that I want to reiterate. I think by now you can see how important these lines are. Therefore, the sages care for the stomach and not the eyes. That is why they discard the other and take this. And this is the completion of chapter 12. We are now getting close to the top of the hour, so let me jump to the summary. Part 1 of the summary we covered previously because it's all about the 5 colors, the 5 sounds, and 5 flavors. As a reminder, take a look at these sub-bullets to see that the 5 colors are about distractions and temptations. They're about seeing the manifestations of material things. One important point that I talked about last time was that it even includes side paths and shortcuts. And the reason why is because the side paths and shortcuts offer the illusion, the mirage of the 5 colors. Think about how scams work in the world. People offer the possibility of gain. It's actually just an illusion, but victims fall for that because they've been distracted and tempted by the 5 colors through the lens of illusion. And then the 5 sounds, we talked about beautiful words that are not true, and we talked about too many words that say too little. So it's the flattery, it's the ego-pleasing, it's also the cacophony, the noise. So whenever possible, we seek quietness internally, and having a quiet external environment can help us do that. And lastly, the 5 colors. Here, the only thing to note is that it's not just about food, but physical sensations in general. As I said, this is the catch-all category. And the bottom line is that attachments to sensory input can lead us astray. We see that in food addiction. We see that in other forms of addiction. Our world, our society is full of examples of how various kinds of addictive behavior, including addictive consumption, have caused a lot of people harm. We can learn from that as a counterexample and not fall into the same trap ourselves. So this is just a quick review of part 1 of the summary. Now, for what we have talked about today, I want to review summary for part 2, the second half. Here, I want to talk about the primary lesson from Lao Tzu, starting with people, observing how people are. What Lao Tzu has observed and what the sages have observed is that many people pursue thrills to excess. I think without trying too hard, you and I can think of people that we know that fit into that category. Also, many pursue material things deemed desirable. Again, not trying very hard, we can think of people who are like that. Indeed, it may be the person in the mirror who's engaged in these excessive pursuits. We're not perfect. Some of us are coming into this Tao practice, Tao learning, Tao cultivation, precisely because we need this kind of reminder. So this is how people are. And the sages want to be different from how most people tend to be. Sages mind the stomach, the basics, and not the eyes, focusing on the spiritual rather than the material. Discard the things that do not contribute to our lives. And sometimes we just carry things around without realizing it. And specifically, sages discard distractions, noises, sensory overload. Those are what this chapter is all about. They discard temporary thrills, material things. Those are in the middle section. And they take those that provide us with true value. What would that be? Well, there's the spiritual, there's tranquility, simplicity, there's lasting joy, there's the Tao. It's all about silence, quietness, simplicity, sustained joy, all that good stuff. So this chapter is merely a categorizing of all the challenges in the way and how you and I can overcome that to really get to what we want in the first place. That lasting joy, that true happiness in the Tao. Our meeting has come to an end, but the journey continues on. Until next time, may the Tao fill you with peace and happiness.